Well, welcome back to the main stage. I hope all of you had a restful evening and an energizing morning. If you're joining us for the first time today at the forum, welcome. We are so glad you're here. To recap briefly our day yesterday, I wanted to share that after opening remarks, we started with our keynote and fireside chat with Dr. Bruce Perry. He showed us how the brain works and why we must do better as a society, including building infrastructure to support early brain development and surrounding young families with strong supports and strong relationships. Dr. Nonax gave us an overview of maternal mental health disorders, including psychosis, and why it can be so difficult to diagnose, as well as current evidence-based treatments. We then heard from Maggie Clark, and a truly esteemed panel who shared their latest policy concepts to build that supportive infrastructure that Dr. Perry discussed. This included paid leave, universal home visiting, and interventions that traditional and non-traditional healthcare workers like doulas, certified community health workers, and certified peer support workers can provide and bill Medicaid for without needing a diagnosis code. We then moved into a discussion with Dr. Ben Miller and his guests about measuring vitality as a means for understanding well-being. And we unpacked social connectedness and loneliness a bit more and discussed this in mothers and the general population. The panel left us with a reminder that volunteering to help someone is a random act of kindness that can do wonders for someone else and for our own personal well-being. We closed out the day with a powerful musical performance by performer Ish, and then headed into regional networking sessions. We have an equally powerful day planned for you today, including 6 breakout sessions, and at the end of our day, networking sessions by topic interest areas. We'll go over what those sessions are in a bit later on today. And before we get started and kick off our program, I wanted to share a few reminders. First is we want you to join us in conversation about yesterday and today's session on social media, particularly on LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're there, you can post directly your own messages or add to comments on our posts. You can find 2020 Mom's social media handles in the rotating slides and also on our website at the very bottom of our webpage at 2020mom.org. And we're going to try something new today, and we're going to open up the Zoom chat for our sessions this morning. So all of you will have a chance to ask questions there or add feedback. We'll see how that works out, but we also invite you to still stay active in the Whova app. And before we get into today's session, I want to invite you to take a deep breath. We're going to do that together. Take a deep breath, inhale, and then exhale. And as you exhale, I want you to think about a word or a word like gratitude as we head into our day. Let's think about gratitude for new learning concepts, for meeting new people, and for the hope we're hearing about in policy and payment strategies. Take another deep breath. And if you want to, you can raise your arms and stretch. And just center yourselves as we head into another fabulous day and get ready to hear our next speaker. As we discussed yesterday, 2020 Mom is committed to lifting the voices of people who've been harmed, starting with the Black and Indigenous populations who face the deepest of all health disparities, including maternal death rates 2 to 3 times that of white women. I have goosebumps. I don't know if anyone else does, but those facts are startling and we've got to do better. Today at the forum, we are centering the experience of the Native American and Alaskan Native populations. And to that end, 2020 Mom is announcing today the release of a new fact sheet on American Indian and Alaskan Native maternal mental health. You can find that fact sheet in the Whova app for this next session and on our website, 2020mom.org. It's on the webpage with our other issue briefs and infographics. And while mothers of any race can face mental health conditions during pregnancy and after childbirth, American Indian and Alaskan Natives, what we call AIAN, it's a mouthful, AIAN women experience higher rates than the average population. Though the body of research is still growing in the US, initial data on the prevalence of maternal depression for the AIAN population in the United States is up to 30%. So 30% of mothers suffer. Today, you will hear from a Native mother, and we will follow her story with a responsive panel featuring others doing important work for this community. The mother we're going to hear from this morning is Ahna Red Fox. She's a member of the Shinnecock Nation, one of the oldest self-governing Native American tribes in New York. Her community, Shinnecock, loosely translates to the people of the stony shore. She also became a birth worker after having her own traumatic birth experience and serves as the executive director of the East End Birth Network and is an Indigenous doula representative of the Suffolk County Maternal Morbidity and Mortality Task Force. Her community looks to her as a community organizer, a birth worker, and a resource hub for pregnancy, birth, and beyond. Before Ahna shares her powerful story, I wanted to share that it could be triggering for some people, particularly those of you who've had something similar happen in your lives. Ahna, we are so glad you're here, and I now will turn it over to you to share your powerful story. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Okwe, greetings. I remember sitting in a small conference room with soft lighting, surrounded by aunties from all walks of life. I was the farthest traveler, though, 1,800 miles from my homelands. Amongst the soft lighting, the voices started to mush together and the stories became one. How is that possible? 1,800 miles away from my trauma, I accidentally immersed myself deeper into it. I wondered how it got cold in the room. I was shivering in my seat, but everyone else appeared to be warm. All of my lingering emotions started to seep out at once. I was triggered. Shivering was my body's response. In the same instance, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't alone. I was welcomed into a village of aunties who walked close to the same paths that I had, the one that led us to that small conference room. In 2016, I was a single mom before I gave birth. I had a widespread support system or a village of family members and loved ones, but still, I felt unheard. Probably because I was only 19 when I got pregnant and 20 when I gave birth. No one understood my point of view, and I was seen as uneducated about the worst case scenario. If you know anything about reservation life, you'd know that healthcare can be little to non-existent. The same goes for maternal health. On my territory, we have a small building that serves as our nation's health clinic. After our first initial appointment, we're pushed off territory by a referral and into the maternal health care world of the East End, otherwise known as the Hamptons. Pregnant with my firstborn, I expressed to my white doctor that I desired a home birth, a water birth to be exact. She looked at me like I had two heads. I followed up with my concern of not being able to have a home birth due to the woman in my family having multiple C-sections. She failed to console me, instead stating it's safer to give birth in the hospital, especially because it's your first baby. In 2016, I suffered a traumatic birth at a local hospital. If it wasn't for my quick thinking doctor, I may not be here today to share my story with you all. I had a healthy pregnancy. My labor was an average 9 hours, but it was 9 hours of distress. I wasn't seen or heard by the labor and delivery nurses. I refused an epidural, but I wasn't permitted to leave my hospital bed for the duration of my labor. I remember the nurses constantly coming in to fix the fetal monitor, stating that the baby's heart rate was dropping with each contraction. I had to be hooked up to the monitors, but never mind the excruciating pain that I was in being on my back. When I felt the urge to push, I was told that it wasn't time yet. That moment, it all plummeted and anxiety began to fill the room. Each contraction caused my baby and myself more distress. They began to threaten the use of a vacuum to deliver him into this physical realm if he didn't come naturally in the next few contractions. I pushed with every single fiber of my being. Not long after I delivered my son vaginally, I started hemorrhaging on the table. The nurses and my doctor were panicking, trying to book an OR. No anesthesiologist was on site. I was going in and out of consciousness, unable to hold my new baby boy. It would take 30 minutes for one to arrive on site. I heard the doctor say that we don't have that kind of time. Everything was a blur and a rush following that. 5 years later, I was horrified when I found out that I was pregnant with another child. All of the feelings that I suppressed about giving birth again resurfaced. The trauma was front and center. I found an amazing home birth team who supported me, offered tools to heal my trauma, and provided a safe and comforting space throughout my pregnancy, labor, and postpartum experiences. In 2021, my partner and his best friend built a traditional birth lodge specifically for the birth of our daughter. Under the rustling trees and stars, my birth team, firekeepers, singers, and aunties gathered to welcome new life earthside. I got to labor my way. I gave birth to a healthy baby girl on my maternal grandmother's lands on Shinnecock territory in Long Island, New York. In 2021, I received a message from Mary Banahan of Postpartum Resource Center of New York to participate in a collaboration with them. We set up a virtual meeting to discuss what their objective was. They offered space for me to share my story and express their emotions towards the high rates of pregnancy-associated suicide deaths in Native American and Alaskan Native women. They applied for a grant which would allow them to provide maternal mental health training to the Shinnecock Nation, my community. This would equip us with the knowledge, resources, and tools to provide a safe space and care for birthing people suffering or those who did suffer with maternal mental health and perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. In 2022, I spent 6 intense days training with Postpartum Resource Center of New York. It was this training that opened my eyes to reflecting on my first birth and postpartum experience. I met with my doctor less than a handful of times, but was never asked in depth about my mental health. I discovered that I suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, postpartum depression, and anxiety. The first 2 years after birth, I cried a lot. There were days I didn't want to shower, let alone get out of bed. The worst impact of my birth trauma was the panic attacks I suffered for at least a year. When I experienced one, I checked myself into the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. That was the first time that I experienced a panic attack in my life. By the second year post-birth, the depression and anxiety calmed down. Thankfully, I was able to create a strong, beautiful bond with my son by pushing through breastfeeding, which we were able to uphold for 15 months with little to no education and support. My birth work journey began not long after our breastfeeding bond came to an end. It took me 5 years to connect and understand the fact. I suffered with PTSD for 5 years leading up to the birth of my second child. 5 years is far too long and highly unacceptable. Unfortunately, not everyone's experiences turn out to be a turnover and as healing as mine. There are many mothers and birthing people who lost their lives to maternal mental health and or from the impacts of healthcare systems in our communities. There are many mothers and birthing people who are still living today, but also struggling with maternal mental health and the lack of education and access to our rites of passage. I want to thank 2020 Mom for allowing me here today and share my story. My name is Ahna Red Fox, and I'm a Shinnecock woman from the Shinnecock Nation. To Bootney for your time. I hope that my journey has given you light to stay connected to the people and the land, show up in love and gratitude, and to give thanks for everything in the natural world and what it offers us, including the teachings that the ancestors have gifted us with. Sometimes beauty grows from pain.
Anna, thank you so much. An amazing story, and postpartum PTSD is real. Thank you for sharing the traumatic birth that you went through and what birth can look like. And your words of wisdom at the end of your remarks are beautiful. We'll be sure to share all of these words of wisdom in the app for everyone who wants to continue to reflect on them. Anna, thank you so much.